Alright guys, today we're going to be going over the behind the scenes of my short film Angel 1. We're going to be talking about what all went into making the teaser, the space sequences with all the stars and the gas clouds, and we're going to be talking about kit bashing, the process in which I made the spaceships that actually appear in the short film. If you haven't already watched the short film or the teaser, be sure to watch those first. Links to those videos are in the description below. Go click them, watch them, and come right back and watch this video. Alright, we're gonna start with the teaser. So I got the idea for this teaser after I saw a poster of an eclipse, and I liked how the sun was peering around the planet, and it's very simple shapes. It's just a round circle. And so I set out to kind of recreate that image with video. I replaced the sun with a high-powered flashlight that you could focus the beam to get the desired width and spread of light. Instead of a planet, I used a soccer ball. I was hoping to get the light to kind of shine on the circumference of the soccer ball to get the roundness so it didn't look as flat. After doing a couple tests with the light peering around the soccer ball, I wasn't getting the desired look that I was really going for, and I realized it was because there was no atmosphere for the light to bounce around to create a glow around the planet or the soccer ball. So I needed to find some sort of transparent atmosphere for the soccer ball, and my first go-to was plastic wrap. I did 3 or 4 layers of plastic wrap around the soccer ball to create a transparent coating for the light to kind of reflect and refract, and getting a little bit of different colors and a light spread around the circumference of the soccer ball. I filmed it at 60 frames per second, but played it back at 30 just to get a bit of a smoother playback. After doing multiple takes of the flashlight going up and down, I picked my favorite, put it in the corner in the angle that I wanted it at. After doing some color correction, this is how it turned out. As far as audio goes, I used an actual piece of dialogue. The sound effect of the explosion was actually 3 different sound effects layered on top of each other to give a bit of more depth to it. The music that was actually used in the teaser came from the YouTube audio library. I actually took 2 songs and layered them together. I threw some titles on top, and that's basically it. All of a sudden I had this low budget sci-fi teaser. Alright. Making space. For the intro of the short film, I wanted this grandiose, I'm not sure if that's a word, this big cosmos feel of space and with gas clouds and stars. I did a lot of research and was like, how do people do practical effects? You know, I don't have time or know how to make these animations. So I did some research and I saw a lot of people did these things in fish tanks where they, you know, drop different colors in fish tanks and the colors would merge together with water and whatnot. But I didn't have a fish tank, so that was out of the deal. I saw another one where the guy time lapses. He drops different chemicals with different colors, food coloring, in petri dishes and jars and whatnot. And it's a very slow reaction, but it's a time lapse, so it can be sped up. I didn't have the time for the time lapse. I didn't know what chemicals to use that I would get those reactions. So I went with a very kind of crude, basic way of doing it. And I took a sheet of glass out of a picture frame and I laid it down on top of a black piano stool so that you wouldn't see anything under the glass except for complete blackness. And I took water and I mixed it with baking powder to get this kind of grainy white paste that was watery enough that I could kind of put in a dropper and drop on this piece of glass. I also took some acrylic paint, diluted it with water to be able to have it more thinner and run a little smoother. And what I did was I took this piece of glass and I just angled it ever so slightly so that any drop of water would just slowly run down the glass. And I would put a couple drops on the glass and then take a couple drops of paint with another dropper, drop it on top. I would swirl it with my finger, pull my finger back. Swirling it with my finger would initiate movement, put it into motion. Paired up with the angle of the glass, it was always guaranteed to slide a certain way. I filmed it with one light from the side. I used a pretty harsh light so it would bring out the graininess of the baking powder and as well as the color of the acrylic paint that I was using. I filmed it top down with the camera directly on top of the glass. I filmed it in 60 frames a second so that I could slow it down back to 30 so it'd be twice as slow, giving it more of a smoother playback. I probably ended up with about 15 different takes with different colors, different styles. Then I put them in my editing software and I actually would layer 2 on top of each other. And to give it more of a dynamic, more depth and more movement, I actually took those 2 clips, overlaid, and one would be twisting one way and and the other would be twisting the other, or one would be zooming in and the other one would be zooming out. And that just gave it a little bit more dynamic to what was visually happening. I would then colorize them, making them look very different from one another. So every time you saw a new scene with a new cloud, the color would be quite different than the one previous to it. Now behind those two layers, I actually had another layer that was actually stars, and those were actually rotating and moving at the same time as well. The stars were actually made in an open source program called GIMP. I basically took a blank canvas, made it black, took a pencil, chose the color white, and just made a whole bunch of dots, hundreds of dots, which represented stars. In fact, all the stars in the entire short film were made this way. When you see stars moving really fast past spaceships, it's actually a picture of the stars that I'm moving from one end to the other end of the screen really fast to create movement. Kit bashing is a process of taking random pieces of different models and bashing them, mashing them, and putting them together and creating something that resembles something totally different than what those model sets were intended to be. So an example would be taking like a model tank and a model truck and a model airplane, putting it all together and coming up with a spaceship. So that's what I did to make the spaceships in the short film Angel 1. Now I didn't have models, but I did have recyclable goods and other just random junk around the house. So I went through everything, grabbed and collected as much cool looking random things as I could find, and I hot glued it all together. The body of the Angel spaceships were actually made out of Nutella jars with a hot glued cup to the front of it, and the wings were made out of CDs that were cut and sliced and layered to represent and resemble an angel. Once the main body was assembled, I had to add details. Now details is the one thing that I find can make and break most things in film. It's the details of costumes, it's the details of models, because nothing in life is really flat and smooth. Everything has a texture to it. The more texture you add to something, the more larger and more realistic it looks. So for these spaceships, I added little pieces of computer components that I had laying around. I actually took little strands of tape, and you can see on the nozzle and on the wings I actually just put pieces of tape, which look really strange when it's not painted, but I knew that once it was painted it would look like compartments or panels on the wings and on the body. So I tried to put as much little details in as possible so that when I would paint it, it wouldn't look like a flat gray, but instead it would have texture to it. The outlier bad guys little cruiser spaceships are actually made out of a glue stick for the center. The wings are actually made out of spoons. There's 3 spoons glued together with some detailing on there. The middle parts are actually part of a juicer. So this was a very basic model, not much to it, but I think it turned out pretty well. You can see it fly by, you know, it moving fast. You can't really tell it's spoons. Once the spaceships were built, I painted them all. I sprayed them all just gray spray paint, so they're all just one solid color. Then I just had some black acrylic paint where I just diluted it with water, poured it on, and wiped it off to give it a bit more of a worn out texture. I actually made burn marks in the wings out of hot glue to give it more of a rigidness. Just painted in there with like black and rusty red looking colors. And if you don't believe me, this is made out of a Nutella jar. It's Nutella. It still smells like Nutella, actually. In fact, I think there's still Nutella in here. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't want to miss part 2 of Behind the Scenes, be sure to subscribe. Until next time, adios.